Hey guys, welcome to another video. I hope you can bear with me as I am editing this from my phone. And this is the first video I took where we were in quarantine and I didn't have anybody to film me, so I've been filming most of these rides that I've been doing by putting my phone on a jump standard. And then I've been cutting out a lot of walking, but also anytime I go out off screen, there's not really a good way for me to film and get the whole ring in it, but I think you're gonna get the general idea. Sorry, it's from so far away. This is the best I can do in quarantine. So I've been riding Ellie every day or almost every day, and this was the first time I rode her during quarantine, and she had had a few days off beforehand because we were really busy right before we started the quarantine, so she didn't get ridden for a couple of days. She's actually really good for this ride considering she had been off for a few days. And I start all of my rides with about 10 minutes of walk, so I cut out some of that so you don't have to watch all 10 minutes of me walking. Right there, I'm coming down the quarter line just to test how her straightness is, and if you look really carefully, you can see that her haunches are to the inside of her shoulders. Inside is towards the middle of the ring, outside is towards the outside of the ring. And she tends to go a little bit crooked unless you do something to correct it. So a lot of this video is me just trying to correct those bits of crookedness from her. I just really wanted to flat her and school her on the flat really well before I started introducing some poles that we're going to work on later, that we did work on after this ride. So you can see I start with a really long rein too. She does not stretch that far that often. It takes kind of a lot of work to get her to stretch. So I always start with a longer rein, although not like totally at the buckle, just because having a little tiny bit of contact lets me straighten her out and make sure she's not looking to the outside or twisting her head around, things like that. And once she's straight and she's balanced, she's usually a little bit more willing to stretch. And then as I go, I just kind of slowly shorten my reins so that it's not abrupt where I'm suddenly taking my reins up and making her fussy and lifting her head back up. No matter how slowly I do it, you can see she does lift her head up higher. And you'll notice through this video, if you're watching carefully, like even there, you can see that my reins are a little bit slack. And the way you'll be able to tell that is because they're not totally straight from my hand to her mouth. There is a little downward kind of curve to them, and that's just the weight of the rein kind of going down. So here I started trying to work some leg yields with her. I'd never asked her before. This is, I think, the first time I ever asked her to leg yield. So when you do a leg yield, you want your horse to stay pretty much straight forward with their hind legs tracking behind their front legs, straight at the wall that you're walking towards. So they shouldn't be turning their body on a diagonal. And then as they're going straight towards that wall, you want to put your inside leg on and have them, well, if you're leg yielding to the outside, you put your inside leg on and ask them to step over towards the outside and cross their legs a little bit and step out. So there, I'm doing another one. And I keep practicing this over and over again just until I feel like she's done a better leg yield. So here, if you watch her legs, I'm putting my left leg on her to ask her to step right because horses move away from pressure. There, she's leading with her haunches a little bit. Her butt is to the outside. There, her shoulders are to the outside. So it's the goal is to get her straight so that she's stepping sideways equally with her front end and her back end and staying perpendicular to the short side of the ring of like ahead of me. And that can be difficult, and a lot of training a green horse is just working on getting them to respond appropriately to the aids that you're using. So with her, I've been working a lot on asking her to step away from my leg laterally, so side to side, rather than just taking the leg and thinking that means faster and speeding up from it, because she is pretty reactive and pretty responsive, and so she tends to be on the quicker side. So if I put my leg on, usually she speeds up. And I want her to also, no, there she does a nice step. I want her to also be able to move sideways off of my leg instead of just speeding up from it. So here I'm pretty happy with the way she goes. Right there you can see her cross over her front legs and then her hind legs. And she stayed a lot straighter that time. She was less wiggly. And I was pretty happy with that. So then I was like, okay, we're done with this exercise. And I brought her into trot. She's got a pretty short trot here with her head up. She's not very relaxed. If you watch my last video, you can see me, you can see some of the things I explained to about how I'm determining whether she's relaxed or tense. And usually when she starts her trot, she's a little tense, her back dishes out, her head goes up, and her stride gets a little bit choppy, and then as we go, she lengthens out. Even there, you can see it's a little better. Her front legs are stepping further out in front of her. We're working a lot on getting her to push off better with her hind end and track her hind legs up further underneath her, but that is a work in progress. So I'm looking at just how big of a step she's taking. Here I start a circle and she falls out with her shoulder, which is why the circle is such a weird shape. I do a lot of turns and a lot of different exercises with her, and basically anytime I ride, I don't spend a lot of time going around and around the rail. I'd say rarely will I do a full lap around the rail without doing some sort of exercise, whether it's lengthening and shortening or leg yielding or changes of bend or circle, otherwise I'm taking them off the rail, circling, changing direction, things like that. There, her shoulder's falling out again, so if you look, you can see that her shoulder is on a track that's to the outside of her haunch and her head. And to fix that, what I do is I just put a little bit of outside leg on and I just close my outside fingers. Like I've said before, Ellie is pretty sensitive, so it doesn't take a lot to get a reaction. You can use your aids pretty gently. And so just closing my outside fingers helps her bring her shoulders back in line with the rest of her body. Here I cut across the diagonal. Again, I tried to do a lot of changes of direction, a lot of switching it up. So we're constantly practicing different things. I'm pretty happy with how she went. She went pretty straight on that line, although she did not change her bend really well. And that's why you saw in that corner with the blue and orange standards that she threw her head up in the air, just because she wasn't totally responsive to the hand and to that change of bend. If she's bent to the outside or crooked, she'll sometimes kind of tilt her head to the side. And then as I'm fixing it and trying to get her straighter, she'll toss her head up a little bit like that. She did that quite a bit this day, but again, she hadn't been ridden in at least a few days, maybe up to a week. So she was really good all in all for not having been ridden for a few days. There, she's starting to drop her head and stretch her neck out a little bit more. I'm happier with that, but you have to kind of stay on top of her bend. So if you watch, I'm trying to get her head just to the inside of her body till I can see her inside eyelashes or so, and I mostly hold that. I try to get her straight on the long sides, but anytime I'm going through a corner or making a turn, I'm asking her to bend a little bit to the inside, which is helping me put her weight onto her outside, which balances her out, because she, like a lot of horses, tends to kind of fall to the inside, put more weight on their inside shoulder than their outside shoulder, and I'm trying to get her to rock to the outside, but also from front to back. So I want her to be pushing off and putting more weight on her hind end, because that's where they are the most powerful. They have the most power in the back. And so a lot of what I'm doing is just trying to get her to sit, especially towards her outside haunch. Here she's much better about the bend, and that's why she keeps her head down a little bit more, and that circle she stayed on the track pretty well. Here I'm just going around the rail again, and you can see she's stepping out further than she was when I first got on her. She's a little less choppy here. There, she's got a nice bend, so I'm happy with that. As she comes down the long side towards the phone, you can look at her legs as a way to measure how straight she is. So because the phone is basically directly in front of that wall, what you want to see is only her front legs. You want her back legs to be so perfectly behind her front legs that you almost can't see them. Sometimes she'll go a little haunch to the inside or haunch to the outside, and you'll be able to see that because you'll see one of those legs step to the inside or the outside of her front legs. So as she's coming down this long side, we're going to take a little look and see what we see. There, that's nice. She stretches. I try to give when she stretches and encourage it. So right there, her haunch is to the inside, and there she's straight. There, she's a little tiny bit haunch to the inside because you can see her right hind leg to the inside of her right front leg. Here she's got a nice bend, her shoulder's more in line. There she just loses it for a moment. So again, I'm touching my outside rein, I'm touching my outside leg, just kind of creating a wall that she can't go past. And here I cut across the diagonal. She was a little squiggly. It's hard to see in this video, but I remember that she was pretty wiggly on that line, so I wasn't super pleased with it, although I am really pleased with the way that she changed her bend, and so her head stayed down and relaxed, which is one of the main things that we're working on, is just trying to get her to relax and stretch forward. Because I didn't like that diagonal, I cut across this diagonal and change direction and go back across the other diagonal. There I'm pretty happy with their straightness. So you can see me change the bend just by switching which rein is a little bit open and which one has a tiny bit more pressure. Here she's just a little bit straighter, although her shoulder is still a touch to the right of the rest of her body. There I get her in line, but that means we have to cut the corner. It's okay. It's going to be all right. We can cut the corner every now and then. Here she's doing a little bit better with her head carriage. And something I'll talk about maybe now is that she used to carry her head totally in the air with her nose poked out. And that dishes her back out under you, and it makes it so that she's not working her top line as well as she should be. So all the muscles through the top of her back, the top of her neck, and the top of her butt, she wasn't using those very well, and she was developing an underline, which was more musculature on the bottom of her neck than the top, which is not ideal, because then they're not using their bodies to the best of their ability. And if you think about it, the horses are athletes, and so it's like if you went to the gym and you did, if you were lifting weights but you were doing it with the incorrect position, you're not going to get as much benefit from that. So asking her to lower her head is just really partly me trying to help her stretch those muscles out and be a little bit less tense, so we can start working towards her working with her body in a better position, so she's gaining more strength through the muscles that count. Here you can see she's got a pretty good canter. There she trips, and then she gets a little upset that she tripped. And I wanted to take her down the quarter line, but we didn't quite make it because of that stumble, just to test her straightness out. I wish that I had a little bit more pace here. She feels a little bit faster than she looks on film, and that's part of why sometimes you'll see me being a little bit slower than you'd think. Here, she wasn't super responsive when I was asking her for a downward transition with my hand, so I just asked her to halt and then asked her to back a couple of steps. She's not very good at backing up yet. She's just started learning how to do that, so we're going to work on that. But that's just a good example of how she is a little bit resistant to the hand, and she is, no matter what bit I've put her in, she's a little bit resistant. I find that with this bit, which I can talk about another time, she's the least resistant to the contact that I give her in this bit, so that's why I ride with this one. It also just gives me better breaks because she doesn't fight my hands so much. Here I give her a good, more than 5-minute walk break, which I think I cut out most of it. Just because I wanted her to stretch, I wanted her to relax, and I wanted her to have an opportunity to catch her breath a little bit. Here, again, you can see my reins are quite long. I'm just asking her to stretch her neck out so that those muscles are stretching a little bit, and she's in a little bit, she frames with her head and her neck, but not in the best way. There we're working on our canter transitions, so that was actually not too bad for her, although we're working on making them a little bit more prompt and relaxed. Here, her right lead canter is just okay. If you can see her leaning a little bit to the inside. So again, I'm using some inside bend and inside leg to try to counter that and get her to sit more onto her outside haunch. Right there, she kind of drops her inside shoulder down. She's got quite a bit of bend, but it's still a work in progress to get her to sit to the outside. There you could see we started the line with her haunch to the inside, and then I tried to straighten her out a little bit. Here I lose the shoulder, so again, I just needed to touch more outside rein, outside leg. And there, as I'm asking her to bring her shoulder around her turn, she resists the contact and throws her head in the air. Now I'm just trying to get her to trot and stretch her head and neck out, so as she reaches, I'm feeding her more rein, trying to get her to just reach further and further. And you'll see that she doesn't actually ever reach that far, but she does a little bit. And right there, you can see I give her the rein. I have to take back just a couple times to keep her in trot because she gets a little bit quick in some moments, but for the most part, I'm trying to just give her a little bit of slack, but keep her as straight as I can so that she'll stretch further to the ground. So you want her to stretch out those back muscles a little bit better. Again, that whole top line, we want her to stretch a little bit better so that those muscles stay comfortable and working properly, because those are the muscles we really care about right now. And if you look at her neck, you can see she's curving the middle part of her neck right now at this point in her training, so her frame is not perfect. We're still working on it. I want to find a little bit more lift right in front of her withers, so if you see as she goes by, she's got a more defined mid part of her neck, and then her the base of her neck by her wither is a little bit less defined and a little bit lower. So working on getting her to lift up through there. But again, I really want her right now not to be going with her head way up in the air, because that is creating, it's a little bit cyclical. It creates a little bit of, it is tenseness showing through. That's why her head is high. But letting her keep her head high is continuing to release tense and anxiety endorphins in her, and I just want her to start to think about work as a relaxed, pleasant experience and less of a stressful experience. So that's what a typical ride looks like, especially a flat school where we're doing a lot of different things. Hope you enjoyed.